Bonjour tout le monde. All right, so we are going to do adjective agreement today. And if you look on page 32 and 33 of your online textbook, if you need a refresher on all of this adjective vocabulary, that is there for you in your textbook, or the PowerPoints that I posted previously on the previous assignments when we covered this topic originally. You can also look at that. So adjectives, you guys may or may not remember, are words to describe things. So he is smart, he is intelligent, he is big, he is tall, he is short, he is silly, he is fun, whatever adjectives you're using to describe people, or whatever words you're using to describe people, those are adjectives. All right. So in French, because everything has gender, even chairs, tables, backpacks, things like that. You need to make sure that whatever adjectives you're using to describe things, you have the correct version of the adjective. So there's a masculine version for singular objects, a feminine version for singular objects, a masculine plural, and a feminine plural for all adjectives. All right, so you need to make sure that you familiarize yourself with how to make things plural in French, how to turn things from masculine to feminine for adjectives and things like that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so let's start off with a pretty easy one. That should be pretty easy for you guys to know. All right, in the book, they give you this form, intelligent. All right, so this we know is the masculine form of the adjective. And it's also singular because it doesn't have an S or anything at the end of it. So if we're talking about a boy student who is intelligent, we can say un étudiant intelligent. And the other thing about adjectives in French is that they go after whatever it is that you are, whatever the object is that you're describing. So they always go after. In French, we would say the intelligent student. The adjective would come before, but in French, it's the opposite. It comes after. Again, there are exceptions. There are a couple adjectives that do go before, but we're not talking about those today. We are only talking about ones that come after. All right, so this is the masculine form of the adjective. If we wanted to make it feminine, we talked about this a little bit previously. A lot of French words, and we're going to say about 80% of French words that are feminine end in a certain letter, okay? You guys might remember that that is the letter E. So in a lot of things, to make it feminine, all you have to do is just add an E at the end of it. And then intelligent becomes intelligente, okay? So you do pronounce this T when you have the E that follows it. In this case, we don't have an E at the end, so we don't pronounce the T, intelligent, and it kind of just falls off the end there, intelligente. So we do pronounce the T in this case. All right? So we're talking about now a female student. So we need a female adjective. Une étudiante intelligente. Okay, so we are going to pronounce both of those T's because we have E's that follow it. All right, and we know that this is feminine because it has an E at the end of it. So we need to make sure that we have an E at the end of our adjective as well. Okay, so in most cases, that is how you make something feminine. Some adjectives do have special forms for the feminine form, and we may talk about that today, just briefly. All right, so now, if I want to make something plural, we do the same thing that we do in English. So in English, to make something plural, we add an S. Very good, amazing. All right, so when we make it plural, and it might be kind of hard, I had to squish it here in the middle. I didn't allow enough space here. So we had to change our article because we're going from a singular object to a plural object. So we got to change our article. Instead of saying one intelligent student, we're saying some intelligent students. So we're changing our articles here. We have to add an S to student because we're going from one student to multiple students. So we need an S at the end there. And then for intelligent, since students is masculine, then we put it in its masculine form, and then students is plural. So we also have to put our adjective in the plural form. So we just add an S to the end of this one since it's masculine. In the case of feminine students, and in this case, we're talking about a group of strictly feminine students because as we talked about previously, if there's even one masculine object or person in a group, then we would just strictly use the masculine form. But here we're talking about only a group of female students. All right, so we're going from one intelligent female student to some intelligent female students. All right, so we had E at the end of both of these when it was just feminine, but now because it's feminine and plural, we have an E and an S, okay? So remember, if it's plural and it's feminine, E and S. And then the same thing goes for our adjective. We have to add E and S to the end of our adjective so that we have agreement, okay? So that covers some of the adjectives that are in your book. So if you see an adjective that looks like this with an E in parentheses, then without the E, that is the masculine form. With the E, that is the feminine form. And then you should be able to add an S to make it plural for both the masculine and the feminine form. And that should make perfect sense to you from the book. Now, there are some adjectives in the book that already have an E at the end of it, and they don't have anything in parentheses. For example, let's work with the word optimist. So this is the form that it's given to you in your book. It already has an E at the end of it, but no, you cannot assume that this is the feminine form because in this case, because it doesn't have the E in parentheses, this is the base form. For masculine and feminine, it's going to look the same. So if we want to say, an optimistic professor. So he is masculine because we have the masculine article at the beginning, un prof optimiste. So we know that he's got to be masculine. This is the masculine form of this adjective, even though it has an E at the end. This is the base form that it's given in, and that is the masculine form and the feminine form as well. So if we say un prof optimiste, they look the same. The only way to determine which professor you're talking about, whether you're talking about a masculine or feminine professor, you just can only look here. That is the only way that you're going to tell the difference because these forms are the same in the masculine and the feminine. When you make them plural, for masculine, what do? We add just an S. All right, so in our basic form, we already have an E, so you do need to have ES even for things that are masculine. All right, and in this case, watch this. They look the same. So here, we're talking about masculine. Move this form down here. And here, we're talking about feminine. We move that form down here. But because the article stays the same, this is spelled the same, and the adjective is spelled the same, we don't know if we're talking about masculine or feminine without specifically referencing maybe names or maybe a class or something like that without being able to determine the gender here. So that is why it's always important to learn the gender of your vocab words because it might not be apparent once you start adding plural articles and plural adjectives might be hard to tell. So make sure you have your agreement down. All right. Some other adjectives that the book presented to you were adjectives of nationality. All right, and just like adjectives about your personality, like I am nice or fun or agreeable or pleasant or whatever it may be, for adjectives about your nationality agree with the person that you're talking about. So if you say, I am Italian, and you're a boy, then your book gives you this as your base form or your normal form. But if you're a girl, there is a slightly different way to make this one feminine. You have to add another N and an E. And pronunciation does change a little bit when it comes to, just like with intelligent, intelligente, we have a little bit of pronunciation difference here. We have je suis italien, if I am a guy, je suis italienne. So that double N, you do pronounce that when you're a girl. If you have a single N, don't pronounce it. Double N, pronounce it. All right. Most case, everybody here is probably American. They do give other nationalities, Mexican, Japanese, Chinese, Canadian and stuff like that. So it might interest you to look up your nationality. And I always recommend using the website Word Reference. That's the best source for looking up any words online as an online dictionary. It gives you the gender, it gives you the different forms, it gives you examples. Word Reference is fantastic. So we're gonna say I am American if we were a boy. And if we were a girl, in this case, we're just going to add an E as normal for girl. We do not have to do this. This is for this one. And you'll see in your book the other adjectives that follow this same rule versus just adding the E rule. It's not really a rule for it, but you guys understand what I'm talking about. So for feminine, again, to make it feminine, just add an E. And once again, a little bit of a pronunciation difference. Je suis américain. Je suis américaine. Okay? So you do pronounce this N if it has the E following it. Do not pronounce the N if it's by itself. Je suis américain. Just kind of left out there in the open. Je suis américaine. So you might be able to see my mouth, see my tongue, American, just a little bit there in the video. Now, of course, when we make it plural, if we want to say you guys are Italian, so now we're talking about more than one person. So as always, just add an S. Pretty simple and easy because you know that we're talking about more than one person. And for feminine, we still have our double N thing going on. So we know that whatever group we're talking to, maybe some female foreign exchange students or something, they're feminine, so we have to have an E and an S for that one. Same thing here. We say you guys are American. We just add an S to the end of the masculine form. We're talking to a group of American guys, they're American. Or if we're talking to a group of American girls, vous êtes américaine. And again, you never pronounce this final consonant. You never hear me say it when I'm talking about these different ones. Vous êtes italien? Vous êtes italienne? Vous êtes américain? Vous êtes américaine? So the only way that you know that these ones are plural is because we're changing the subject of our sentence, and that's the only way that you can tell we're talking to more than one person. All right, and with nationalities, there's one more thing that I want to talk about real quick. When we want to talk about somebody who is French, in your book, they tell you that the adjective, the masculine form is français, like that. And they do have an E in parentheses, so you know that if you want to make it feminine, that is how you make it feminine, you just add the E. And so we can say, he is French. She is French. They, masculine. Remember, masculine form. Ils sont français. And elles sont françaises. All right, now, you might think that I have made a spelling error. I'm going to explain to you why I have not made a spelling error here. And if you did not catch it, that's okay. We're going to talk about it. So when we're talking about one, we're already given our masculine form here. So we know that we're already given our masculine form here. So it's pretty simple and straightforward. Il est français. We don't have to do any spelling changes. We don't have to do any agreement changes. It's just singular and masculine basic form. Elle est française. So now we're talking about a girl, so we have to make it feminine. And according to this, how do we make it feminine? We add an E. So we add the E right at the end. And you might be able to hear a little bit of a pronunciation difference again. Il est français, elle est française. So we are pronouncing that S sound, again, like a Z, but we are pronouncing the S sound because it is followed by that E. Now, let's go ahead and skip down to the feminine plural form because this follows the basic pattern that we've been talking about this whole time, and there's no surprises here. Elles sont françaises. So now we know that we're talking about multiple people. We change our verb to the plural form, elles sont françaises, and because they're feminine, we add an E, and because it's plural, we have to add an S at the end. All right, but between this one and this one, the only pronunciation difference is with the different verb. Otherwise, elle est française, elles sont françaises. We've got elle, française, française. Having this extra S here at the end does not do anything with pronunciation. Now, look at this one. This one is a little bit different. And this is where you might think that I have made a mistake. But I am telling you I have not. So this is our masculine form. Here, we're dealing with a masculine plural form. So how do we usually make things plural? We add an extra S. The problem with that is that this already ends in an S. So we don't do anything to it and we leave it the same, which might be easier, might be hard to remember for you. I personally think it's a little bit easier, but for the masculine singular, and for the masculine plural, the adjective is going to stay the same, only for these ones that end in S, all right? Your book gives you also Québécois, Sénégalais, Japonais. Those are some examples that also follow this rule because they end in S in the masculine form. Okay, for all the other ones, you still follow the same pattern, adding an E, adding an ES for the feminine plural, but for the masculine, that is the one that is not going to change when it ends in an S, like this one does. All right, so once again, you guys, let me know if you have any questions, and I'm always available for tutoring or help or anything that you guys need. All right, au revoir.